Imagine standing on the surface of Venus. The first thing that kills you is not the heat, it is the pressure. The air here is 90 times heavier than Earth's, dense enough to crush a submarine, pressing on your chest like 500 meters of ocean water. You cannot move, you cannot breathe, and you have not even noticed the temperature yet. The temperature is 465 degrees Celsius, hot enough to melt lead, hot enough that the rocks around you would glow faintly in the dark. The sky is not blue, it is a sick, heavy yellow-orange, and the clouds are raining sulfuric acid that boils away before it ever reaches the ground. A single day here lasts longer than an entire year. The planet turns backwards. The sun would rise in the west and set in the east, taking nearly 4 Earth months to cross the sky. This is the most hostile world in the solar system. But here is the part they do not tell you. Venus was not always like this. Billions of years ago, you could have stood on this exact spot and seen blue sky, liquid water, maybe even an ocean stretching to the horizon. Venus used to look like Earth, and something turned it into hell. This is the story of how a planet almost identical to ours died. Why the Soviet Union sent spacecraft after spacecraft into this furnace and watched every single one die. And why, after decades of believing Venus was a dead, frozen corpse of a world, scientists in 2026 found evidence that it might still be alive. What happened to Venus is not just a story about another planet, it is a preview. Because Venus and Earth started in the same place, born from the same material side by side, and then one of them went wrong. Once you understand how, you will never look at our own sky the same way again. From Earth, Venus is the most beautiful thing in the night sky. We call it the morning star and the evening star, though it is neither. It is the third brightest object we ever see, after the sun and the moon. Bright enough to cast a shadow. People have mistaken it for a UFO for as long as we have been looking up. For most of human history, we had no idea what was underneath. The entire planet is wrapped in a permanent, unbroken layer of cloud about 20 kilometers thick. No telescope could see through it. So we filled in the blank with imagination, warm, wet, tropical. A jungle world, a swamp planet. A second Eden right next door. It made sense. Venus is almost exactly the same size as Earth, same mass, same rocky composition. By every measurement from a distance, Venus was Earth's twin. The first clues something was wrong came from radio telescopes in the 1950s. The surface was radiating at over 300 degrees Celsius. That was not tropical, that was an oven. Then we went there. The atmosphere was 96% carbon dioxide, thick and suffocating. The pressure was 90 times Earth's, and those beautiful clouds were made of concentrated sulfuric acid. But the deepest mystery was a single chemical fingerprint hidden in its atmosphere. A story that said this dead furnace was once covered in water, and then lost every drop. The fingerprint is the deuterium to hydrogen ratio. Deuterium is heavy hydrogen, an atom with an extra neutron. Measure that ratio and you are reading the history of a planet's water. When spacecraft measured it on Venus, the number was staggering. Venus has over 100 times more heavy water relative to normal water than Earth does. There is only one good explanation. Venus once had enormous amounts of water, and something stripped the lighter kind away into space, leaving the heavy remnant behind. To leave that much behind, Venus had to start with oceans. Real oceans, hundreds of meters deep, sitting on the surface for a very long time. The dead planet was once a blue one. Recent climate models suggest those oceans lasted not millions but billions of years. Some show Venus held a stable, temperate climate for 2 to 3 billion years. Venus may have been habitable for most of its existence. If Venus had oceans, a stable climate, and billions of years right next to a planet where life appeared, what happened there in all that time? We do not know. We may never know. Around 700 million years ago, something went catastrophically wrong. The oceans began to disappear, the temperature began to climb, and once it started, it could not stop. It is called a runaway greenhouse effect. It works like a feedback loop that feeds on itself. The sun slowly got brighter and Venus crossed a threshold. The oceans started evaporating faster. Here is the trap. Water vapor is itself a powerful greenhouse gas. More evaporation means more vapor, which traps more heat, which evaporates more water. Each step makes the next worse. There is no natural break. The oceans boiled into the sky. Up there, sunlight broke the water molecules apart. The light hydrogen floated off into space. That is the missing water. The planet cooked itself dry in a geological blink. What was left was carbon dioxide. On Earth, oceans and rocks lock it away. With the oceans gone, Venus had nowhere to put it. It piled up until the atmosphere became a crushing, heat-trapping blanket. The temperature settled at 465 degrees, not just at the equator, everywhere, at the poles, at night. The thick atmosphere spreads heat so well, the whole planet is the same lethal temperature, always. Now the uncomfortable part. Earth runs on the same chemistry, the same greenhouse gases, the same feedback loops. A runaway like Venus is not coming for us soon, but Venus proves the mechanism is real. It is not a theory, it is a planet. So how do we know? We learned it the hard way, by sending machines into the furnace and watching them die. And no one tried harder or lost more than the Soviet Union. Through the 1960s, the Soviets threw probe after probe at Venus, and Venus destroyed almost all of them. The ones that reached the atmosphere were crushed like tin cans before they touched the ground. Then, in 1970, Venera 7 became the first spacecraft in history to land on another planet and send data back. It survived 23 minutes before the heat and pressure silenced it. The first voice from another world, and it lasted less than half an hour. Later, landers did something almost unbelievable. They survived long enough to take photographs. We have actual pictures from the surface of Venus, flat, cracked, orange-grey rock under a dim sky. And then every one of them died. The longest any spacecraft ever survived on the surface is just over 2 hours. We have never built a machine that could last a single Venus afternoon. The wreckage is still there. Right now, scattered across Venus are the crushed, melted remains of a dozen spacecraft from a country that no longer exists, slowly eaten by acid on a planet no human will ever walk on. For decades, the story seemed finished. A planet that had oceans, lost them, cooked itself, and died. Geologically dead, frozen in its final state forever. That was the textbook answer. The clues were hiding in plain sight. In the early 1990s, NASA's Magellan spacecraft mapped almost all of Venus with radar and found a world covered in over 80,000 volcanoes, more than any other planet. Everyone assumed they were ancient. But scientists went back to the old Magellan data and compared images of the same volcano months apart. Between the two, the surface had changed. A vent had grown. New lava had flowed. 30-year-old pictures were showing an eruption. In May 2026, a paper in Nature Communications pulled it together under a title that says everything: Venus Reawakening. Changing surfaces, shifting gases, fresh lava, pointing to a planet that is not a corpse at all. Venus appears to be volcanically active, possibly erupting right now as you watch this. This overturns the comfortable story. Venus might still be churning, resurfacing itself, breathing out gas and lava in slow geological breaths. The corpse we wrote off may have been moving the whole time. And if Venus is still active, it is still venting gas into the atmosphere, still changing. Which makes one of the strangest claims about Venus harder to dismiss, that something might be alive there right now, not on the surface. The surface is lethal beyond argument, but rise about 50 kilometers into the middle of that cloud layer and the pressure drops to roughly Earth sea level. The temperature falls to 30 to 70 degrees, warm but survivable. It is the most Earth-like environment anywhere else in the solar system. Not Mars, not any moon, a layer of the Venusian sky. If life ever existed on early watery Venus, could some of it have retreated upward and survived as the world below burned? This was a fringe idea until 2020, when a team detected phosphine in Venus's clouds. On Earth, phosphine is made almost only by living things. Finding it floating there with no obvious way to make it set off a storm. Had we found life on Venus? The honest answer is we do not know, and we should be careful. Other teams could not confirm it. Newer research shows phosphine can form with no life at all. The discovery is contested. It may turn out to be nothing. But it has not gone away. It has been argued over for years, and the debate is still open. Nobody has proven there is life in the clouds of Venus, and nobody has proven there is not. The only way to settle it is to go back. After being ignored for a generation, Venus is the most exciting destination in the solar system again. NASA is preparing Da Vinci, a probe that will plunge through the atmosphere to the surface, and Veritas, an orbiter to hunt for active volcanism. Europe is sending Envision. India has announced its first Venus mission. Other agencies and private companies are drawing up plans. After 30 years of silence, humanity is about to descend on Venus all at once. These missions are built to answer the questions this planet keeps throwing at us. How much water did Venus have, and when did it lose it? Is the surface still erupting? And what is floating in those clouds? But there is a shadow. Budget pressures at NASA have thrown the timing and even the survival of these missions into doubt. The window is open, but it may not stay open. The neglect that left Venus unexplored could happen again, which would be a tragedy. Venus is the closest thing we have to a controlled experiment on the fate of an Earth-like world. A planet that started where we started and ended in fire. Understanding why is not curiosity. It is closer to self-preservation. So here is what Venus actually is, not only the hell you picture. Venus was once like Earth, same size, same materials, possibly the same blue oceans, sitting right next door for billions of years. A second chance for life in our own solar system. And then it crossed a line. The oceans rose into the sky, the carbon dioxide piled up, the heat trapped more heat, and a world that might have been a second Earth became the most hostile surface we have ever found. We sent our machines and the planet melted them. We called it dead and it was moving. We called it Earth's twin and it became Earth's warning. It is not what you think. It never was. Tonight, Venus will be there again. The brightest point in your sky, just after sunset or before dawn. It will look calm, beautiful. And now you know what is actually underneath that light. A blue world that became a furnace, a graveyard of spacecraft, a question we still have not answered. Two planets were born together at the start of the solar system. One is the world you are standing on, full of oceans and life. The other lost everything. They began as twins. Only one of them is still alive. The only question worth asking is which story we are living in, and whether, when we send our machines back into that furnace, Venus will tell us how a living world dies, in time for it to matter, whether we listen or not.